had no idea.
We are about to explore and we'll show you what we find. But we can go in. Look at this. We can go in.
We're gonna fix this.
We're gonna fix this. Oh, that's her son. That's gonna be her son. So I was able to look on the map and locate each of those tombstones that shows up on the map around his grave.
Heavenly Father probably knew we should have it.
The original kitchen that was added on was out there, and it was adobe.
Oh yeah, this goes on your ear.
Yes, you get to keep your fan. And this one right here, that's the closest one. And we are doing this. We're doing it. Spoiler alert, if you haven't yet listened to the audiobook, there's a link down below in the video description. This is the story of how I discovered a story so fascinating that it needed to be told, a story so incredible that it was turned into a book so captivating that I couldn't put it down. A book so inspiring that it reshaped my purpose, and throughout its twists and turns, I came to learn that I was personally connected to the people in this story. For this was the story of my great-great-great-grandparents, whom I didn't know existed. Knowing this changed everything about what I thought I knew of my family history. Yet all these years later, I came to discover there was a twist. The story told in the book wasn't the full story. In fact, it had been rewritten in the form of fiction to entertain future generations rather than to educate them. I had been duped. This confusing realization sent me on a quest to deep dive into the past and separate fact from fiction, to retell the story the way it was meant to be told, to heal the past, bridge the gaps, and find answers to questions no one was even asking, to inspire you, the viewer, to explore your own family history and retell the stories the way they were meant to be told. This is the story of the life-changing experiences and miracles that unfolded as I did just that. It was last summer, July to be exact. My kids participated in their first ever Pioneer Trek experience. I had just finished up author readings of my fiction novel, The Realm, and wanted to choose the next book to read on my YouTube channel. We were getting ready to celebrate my daughter's birthday on July 23rd and Pioneer Day on the 24th, when the idea came into my mind to read the story of my great-great-great-grandmother, Elizabeth Mills Oakton Whitaker. I proposed the idea to my subscribers, and they were all for it. So the journey began. Well, with it being the month of July and Pioneer Day approaching, after considering everyone's input, it looks like the next book that we're going to read is the biography of my ancestor, Elizabeth Mills Oakton Whitaker. Now, if you live in Davis County, especially Centerville, you've probably driven past her home, whether you realized it or not, and you might just find that you yourself have some connections to some of the people in this story. For those of you who don't know, this book right here is what got me into family history several years ago. I remember cleaning out a closet and this book happened to be on the shelf. I had never seen it before, I didn't know what it was, and it turns out my grandma's sister had been passing through. She had given this book to my mom to give to someone else in our family. Somehow my mom brought it to my house and it ended up with me, and I didn't know what it was. So I remember sitting down one day and I cracked this book open and just began to read. I started to notice the pictures in the back. I first noticed this photograph in the back, the Thomas and Elizabeth Whitaker home, Centerville Museum and Cultural Center located at 168 North Main Street. I couldn't believe that my great-great-great-grandma had lived less than 20 minutes away from my home right here in Davis County. Now, I'm the only member of my family who lives in Davis County. I was born and raised in Salt Lake County, yet for some reason I was drawn to Davis County, and it has always felt like home. Though my family never understood what it was I loved about living in Davis County, it all started to make sense when I learned that my ancestors had helped settle this area. It almost felt like my DNA was in this soil. And over the years, as I developed a love for gardening and canning, being self-taught yet feeling as though it came natural, I knew that I must have inherited this from my great-great-great-grandma Elizabeth, whom I learned from reading this book that she too also was self-taught and had a love for gardening and preserving food. Now that I knew she had a home still standing in Centerville that was now a museum, I felt like I had hit the jackpot. I wondered how many times I had driven past this road and driven past this home, this museum, without knowing that belonged to my great-great-great-grandmother.
And immediately I had a fascination and I felt a connection with this book and this ancestor. I had no idea that one of my great-great-great-grandmothers was a renowned pioneer and that she had a museum and a book written about her. I had no idea. And in that moment, when I made this connection, I thought to myself, how is it I'm related to some pretty incredible people and no one has ever told me? And I remember times I would call up my grandma and I would ask her about her memories and just anything she could tell me about her childhood growing up, what her memories were of this grandmother of hers, and she never wanted to talk about it. I also remember learning that people believed that her son, which is my great-great-grandfather, had committed suicide. And after reading this book and reading the newspaper clipping and his obituary, I was able to piece together the story of what really happened and came to learn that it was an accident. Anyways, as I was going through this whole process, I went out to the museum one day and we got the grand tour.
The original kitchen that was added on was out there and it was adobe. The city bought the building and they rent it. So if you have people come in here that want to have family reunions, we've had a lot of Whitakers have relatives come, and they rent the building and the city charges a fee, $15 an hour, I think, and you could be in the building and just have the whole building to yourself all night. So we have a lot of people that rent it, especially in the summer.
Wow. I remember the lady working that day said, "Oh my goodness, you are a descendant of William?" She said she'd been doing this for years and she had never met a descendant from Elizabeth's first son.
This sweet woman, Clara Gowdy, passed away in 2016, but way back in 2001, it was declared by Governor Levitt that September 6th would officially be declared as Clara Gowdy Day because of her endless service to Centerville City. It was Clara Gowdy who entrusted me with the remaining inventory of Elizabeth's biography. I'll never forget the day when she showed up at my home in a panic with a box of books that she had rescued from the dumpster. Elizabeth's biography had been written by her granddaughter, Nora Barber Miles, the daughter of Elizabeth's oldest daughter, Elizabeth. During the end of Elizabeth's life, she lived with her eldest daughter, and Nora had the privilege of helping take care of her and took advantage of those precious moments, interviewing her grandmother and recording those memories. Elizabeth passed away in 1937, and it wasn't until 50 years later that Nora would publish the book. Nora was founder of the Centerville Art and Literature Club, organized in March 1938. She had an extensive library in her home, which she shared with everyone. But she was also a pioneer in genealogical research and had submitted almost 3,000 family history sheets to her family tree. This was before things were made a lot easier with the internet. And by 1969, Nora had turned over to Centerville City 1,110 birth and burial records dated 1858 through 1969 that she herself had personally researched, all with proven references. These records were filmed by the Genealogical Society. With these credentials and this background, it's come as a surprise to future generations as to why she chose to include so much fiction in her grandmother's biography without disclosing that in the introduction. It's apparent she must have had a love for drama and romance novels. But unfortunately, her choice to fictionalize her grandmother's biography created a lot of confusion for future generations. I decided to interview Centerville historian Paul Smith to see if I could clear some things up.
Oh, hi, Lindsey.
How are you?
Fine, thanks.
Oh, good. Good. I'm so glad you were able to meet with me. This is really good because I have some questions and I just didn't know who to ask.
Oh, well, I hope I've got some answers for you. You know, she was a granddaughter of Elizabeth. And have you read through the book?
Yes.
Carefully? Okay, so you know that periodically she'll say, well, when grandmother started to talk about the early days or something, I took careful notes.
Yes.
Well, I understand from people who knew her here in Centerville that she had a large library and that she was a family historian.
Uh-huh.
And so she really should know the importance of being accurate. And why she decided to create a kind of a romance, I don't know. Because she got so many things wrong when she was telling Elizabeth's story.
Do you know anybody who met Nora?
Yes, I did.
What were their thoughts? Because I am trying to understand her.
She was goofy.
She was goofy. Okay. Makes sense.
And that's not a good term, but
yes.
Her personality was different.
Mm-hmm.
A different personality.
Okay.
Yeah, she had her moments.
She had her moments. Okay. So the purpose of this book, I don't know if anybody would have known that, but I just was curious, was it more to sell a story or was it more she was trying to preserve the history?
Well, I think it was more to tell a story because if she intended to preserve a history, I have to say that I did benefit from it because there were a lot of things in there I learned that I could not have found elsewhere.
Yeah.
But then there were a lot of conclusions she made and so on that I found were wrong. And so I tell people actually not to read it. Because typically members of the family have gone to her sources and repeated them over and over again, errors.
Oh, yeah.
Because they took everything she wrote as accurate.
Yeah.
And so they will repeat those things over and over again when they retell the story. And that's one of the reasons why I've been upset with it.
Okay. I see, and I feel bad because I didn't know any different. So everything I read the book years ago and I still have it. And I just believed it, hook, line, and sinker.
Oh.
I did. I thought, wow, this is incredible. And then as I've gone back, because I'm reading it a second time, I have cousins, friends, family, people who just all want to borrow it. And I just thought, well, maybe what I'll do is, I thought, well, what I'll do. And so that's why I'm glad I'm doing this, because I decided I would record a chapter each week and just put it on my YouTube channel so they could just listen to it, which is what people have been doing. And then they have all these questions, and I thought, well, let me look into that. And as I've looked into it, that's when I started to discover a lot of the things in there weren't lining up with the book, with what I was finding. So then I thought, so now what I'm going to do is my very last video, when I'm done reading the book, is going to clear all of it up.
Oh, wonderful.
That's
Oh,
why I'm doing this.
wow.
I felt it was my responsibility, as I had been sharing Elizabeth's biography on my YouTube channel, to sort out the fact from the fiction and share it in this documentary. Those who have become fans of Elizabeth's story might be a little bit surprised to find out what was true and what was false. And this is where the documentary begins. Elizabeth was born the 7th of March, 1839, in the coastal town of Douglas on the Isle of Man, to John Mills of Belfast, Ireland, and Elizabeth Hall of Kent, England. Elizabeth was the second of 6 children. In the book, Nora refers to Elizabeth as Sarah and said that was her preferred name. However, all documented memories, photos, stories, documents with signatures all show Elizabeth. There is no reference or mention of Sarah. But she did say in the interview, or at the very beginning, we call her Sarah because she hated the name Lizzie and Elizabeth, so we called her Sarah. And I said, oh, okay.
Now you're talking about Thomas's wife?
Yeah, Elizabeth.
Yeah, Sarah doesn't sound right to me.
Yeah, we've all called her Elizabeth, so.
I just don't see that. I just
Yeah.
haven't seen that in all the, no.
Okay. Okay. All right, I think that's her middle name, and that's why
Oh,
her middle name is Sarah, so they said,
okay.
according to Nora in the book, she said Elizabeth hated being called by her name, so we called her by her middle name, Sarah. So,
Well, if you can find that usage anywhere else, in anybody else's writings, then use it. But I sure have not seen. I would have thought that in all my research, I would have seen that, but that's a question mark.
yeah, okay. And yeah, and I guess it's not too important, but it is, I was just curious because,
Sure.
Just want to clear
Yeah, of
anything up.
course. You want to be accurate.
I do. I really do. In the book, Nora refers to Elizabeth's mother as Martha, but clearly her name was Elizabeth, and Martha was actually Elizabeth's youngest daughter. In the book, Nora refers to the youngest daughter as Carrie. Most likely, from an author's point of view, having 2 characters named Elizabeth would have been confusing. So Nora decided to change Elizabeth's mother's name to Martha and Martha to Carrie. However, she never referred to Elizabeth by her actual name Elizabeth. She changed her name to Sarah, so there were no Elizabeths in the story. And in the story, there is no mentioning of Mary Alice, child number 5. However, the author decided to create a character whom she named Mary Alice. We'll get back to this character later on in the documentary. At 2 years old, Elizabeth became blind, caused by a terrible siege of scarlet fever. Her parents had heard the gospel preached by John Taylor, who later served as the 3rd president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Around this time, Latter-day Saint missionaries ministered unto Elizabeth. Members of the church in that area gathered around Elizabeth and her parents. Through their prayers, faith, and fasting, she was healed. Her parents were so delighted that they immediately embraced the gospel, were baptized, and sailed to America. Upon arriving in Nauvoo, they were met by John Taylor, who took them into his home and fed them dinner. Elizabeth and her family had a personal relationship with Joseph Smith, and Elizabeth's father was requested to make the horns and the ears of the oxen, which are now in the Salt Lake Temple. While in Council Bluffs, in 1851, Elizabeth's younger brother Thomas, aged 10, was bitten by a rattlesnake and he passed away. 2 years later, in 1853, Elizabeth's other brother, William, age 9, died from diphtheria. Elizabeth had an older sister, Mary Jane, who passed away shortly after Elizabeth was born. She passed away at about the age of 2.5 years old. In 1852, they sold their home and made their journey westward. Elizabeth's two sisters and her mother were assigned to one company, while Elizabeth and her father left with another company just 4 miles ahead. It is unclear why Captain Wilkie split up the family and assigned them to 2 separate companies. It was on this journey that 13-year-old Elizabeth was kidnapped by a Sioux Indian chief. By a miracle, her father was able to locate her and bought her back with provisions. The family arrived in Utah September 9, 1853. 3 years later, Elizabeth's father decided to go to California to work in the gold mines. While there, he died in a mining accident. It was during this time that Elizabeth met Charles Oakden, and the two of them began to court. In the book, the author writes into the story that Elizabeth and Charles met on their journey west and that they traveled in the same company, but this was not true. And in the book, it was written into the story that Charles was not a member of the church and refused to be baptized. However, he was actually baptized in England a month before they set sail to America. In fact, he and his family arrived in Utah about 9 months after Elizabeth and her family arrived in Utah. After Elizabeth and Charles had courted for about 6 months, that's when Charles's brother, William, came onto the scene. It is true that Charles had a temper, which was off-putting to Elizabeth. Elizabeth and William seemed to have similar natures. It was around this time that Elizabeth told Charles not to see her anymore. Before the year was over, and with steady courtship, one moonlit night, after they had been out horseback riding just outside the fort wall, William dismounted from his horse and told Elizabeth he had something very important to talk to her about, which he wished to make known to her. And standing by their horses, he told her of his love, and she told him it was mutual. They were married October 6, 1855. It's been said that Elizabeth's father left for California in the spring of 1856. If this is true, this would mean that he would have been present for Elizabeth's wedding and that he would have known William. In the book, it's been written in the story that her father did not know William, had never met him, and was not there for her wedding, as he was already in California. Adding even more confusion to the story is this account written by Elizabeth's granddaughter, Florence Carver. She wrote, "After arriving in the valley in 1850, Father established himself in a shop, and while in California for materials and supplies, died 1854 there. Records show that Elizabeth and her family immigrated to the U.S. in 1842. They lived in Iowa in 1850 and then came to Utah in 1853. As you can see, this conflicts with the personal account that says they arrived in Utah in 1850 and that her father passed away in 1854, when the records show that he passed away in 1857. And to add even more confusion, the story goes that Elizabeth's first husband was actually Lyman Smith Hutchings. He was married to her in 1854 at the request of her mother, who was struggling to make ends meet after the death of her husband, and so she requested that Elizabeth marry this man who had offered to marry Elizabeth and take that burden off of her mother. He was already married, so Elizabeth would have been his second wife. She, being only a teenager, was very hesitant and resistant, but her mother talked her into it with the promise that Lyman was only marrying her to help out with the burden and that there would be no intimate physical relations involved. However, that was not the case, and right after they were married, instead of taking her home, he took her up into the mountains to a cabin where he planned to have physical relations with her, at which point she escaped through a window, ran home and hid, and their marriage was annulled 6 months later.
This fellow you're referring to came to Elizabeth's mother and said, I know that, you have a problem here caring for your family. And if I may marry your daughter, I will not have relations with her, but I'll care for her as a father. So financially, you'll have that help. I think it was a year later or something. I don't think it happened right away. But anyway, when they did get married, he took her toward the mountains, and she said, well, where are we going? And they got up to a cabin, and he locked the door, and it was very evident what he was going to do. Oh. And so she escaped. He went into another room to change. And I guess she escaped through a window and made her way down, and had that ceiling canceled because they were married. He was had her married for eternity, and she had that ceiling canceled, and he eventually went on, I think, to California, remarried, and had a family, but there were. I think this is the reason, this is the source for her bitterness toward plural marriage. Oh, because he was not an honorable man. He did not keep his word. And it was evident what he was there for. I really think that was what soured her. But there were two other men, apparently, who approached her. John D. Lee was one, and I forget who the other one was. They just turned him down. But he was the source. I'm absolutely sure why she made Thomas a promise when they were first married that he would never consider it, because she had been such a. I mean, here she had to escape the guy, and I believe that's a true story.
In the story, she talks about how if only her father had been there, he would have prevented this from happening. She also talks about how if only her father was alive, he could have met William and he would have loved her husband. But according to the records, her father was alive and he would have been there. So this adds confusion to the story and really doesn't make a lot of sense. With several records verifying that her father was alive during this time, it seems to conflict with personal handwritten accounts from Elizabeth by herself and her grandchildren saying that her father had passed away and that all of these events took place a few years prior to the dates of the actual records. In fact, I was surprised to learn that Elizabeth's mother married another man while her husband was still in California. And as I read the notes on this, many theorized that it was possible that she believed something had happened to her husband because they had very little contact while he was away. Again, there is confusion because this marriage took place in 1855, and according to written documents, Elizabeth's father left for California in spring of 1856. It would make sense that Elizabeth's father left much earlier than that to California, as his wife remarried in 1855, and Elizabeth's mother coaxed her into marrying her first husband, Lyman Smith Hutchings, to relieve that burden of having to take care of Elizabeth. It sounds as though Elizabeth's mother felt she had to support her family on her own, which would make sense if Elizabeth's father was away in California with no communication. Her mother's second marriage was a very unhappy one and short-lived, which sounds to be the result of choosing to marry for survival. A couple years later, her mother married a third time. Again, it wasn't the happiest of marriages. Her third husband was 17 years younger than her, and together they had a few children. She and her husband left the church to join this movement of Joseph Morris. His group was known as the Morrisites. Joseph Morris claimed to receive his own revelation and told his followers not to worry about planting crops because the second coming was imminent. At odds with the Utah Territory government, a war broke out known as the Morrisite War. After the death of their leaders, the Morrisites scattered, mostly going to Soda Springs, Idaho. which is where Elizabeth's mother lived out her remaining days. It's possible that this could be the reason for the estranged relationship between Elizabeth and her mother. With many of her mother's decisions motivated by fear and uncertainty, Elizabeth most likely resented her mother's choices and felt a closer bond to her father.
And I wrote about a 400-page biography of Thomas Whitaker, and I was just having all kinds of trouble. And one night, I remember at the middle of the night, her timing on his marriages was just all wrong. Just completely wrong. And in the middle of the night, all of a sudden the answer came, and it fell into place. And then from there on, I could go from and ignore much of what she said regarding that topic, and it worked out fine.
And with so much confusion between the records and the written personal accounts not matching up, we can only guess about what really happened. Could it have been the result of failing memory due to old age? Could it have been the result of things getting lost in translation and lost in communication? This part of the story has yet to be sorted out, but hopefully someday it will. Now let's turn the page and talk about William Oakden, my great-great-great-grandfather. Just who was he, and what was his story? There are no photographs of him, and very little has been documented about his life. I have my theory as to why that is the case, but we'll get to that later on in this video. I felt to better understand his story and who he was, I would start right in Salt Lake City, at the place where he was last seen, the Salt Lake City Cemetery.
Block 12?
Yeah, this is it. Aren't we plot 12? Aren't we?
I guess. I mean, this whole area looks pretty big though.
It does. It wasn't easy locating his grave, but pressed with a time crunch, my sister Krista and I knew we had to work fast. 7, 8. See, but these could be plots with no names.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a lot dug up here, Chris. This is weird. Lots dug up. I wonder why. Oh, yes, Krista. You're so good.
I'm just looking it up.
Yeah.
Joseph,
Krista,
James.
I've walked past this before when we took Marcus here. We saw this.
This whole time.
This whole time I didn't know. Yes. Okay, so he's right here. Because is that the Kinserly?
So Joseph James Whitaker, he's a judge.
Yeah, he was a judge.
Judge
Yep.
Joseph James Whitaker.
Uh-huh. Yep. And so Will, yep, Will is right here.
What?
He's right here. This is Will's grave.
I thought this was going to be a lot harder.
Krista, we did it.
We did it.
We did it.
Mills.
Oh,
right
Mills.
there.
John Mills. Krista, John Mills.
Yeah,
John.
Mills. Ida Oakley. We were talking about
Taylor. She married. She's the
Yeah,
prophet's.
we have a picture of her.
Yes, Krista, we do. We have a picture of her. It's all coming together.
Mother, father.
Here's some more Whitakers.
We're not related to the Whitakers.
Not by blood. No. But this is it.
So, where's her grave? Centerville?
Centerville.
And that's where she's buried with her husband?
With her husband.
But all their kids are here? What?
I'm wondering if they must have owned some grave plots here they needed to use.
Yeah, because look, this says Kinsley.
Yeah, we're not related to the Kinsleys.
That's a big headstone.
Yeah. Nope. So we found if anyone wants to visit his grave, it's right next to Judge James Joseph Whitaker, right by this cemetery. This part of the cemetery. That is, I think that's the prophet. I'm not kidding. Let's go check out Monson. Let's go check it. We're gonna see if this is President Monson's grave. It's pretty big. Right over there. It is!
Oh my gosh, you're right.
Wow.
That is
Okay,
huge.
so this is President Monson, the prophet, the last prophet of the church.
Is right by our
Was right by our ancestor. How about that, you guys?
16th president of the church.
Yes. That is so cool.
There because it would have blown away.
Yeah, it would have been watered on.
By President Ronald Reagan initiatives in 1981.
This is a special part of the cemetery where only special people are buried. I'm getting that feeling. Are you?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like you just look, you've got covered wagons on the tombstones. These are like some important people.
Right. Because wouldn't that put him in there?
Oh, so we're standing on his body?
Yeah, I would think it would go this way,
Oh,
and the
okay.
father would go this way, because then that'd put them in that gate.
It would put them in the gate, you're right. So he's right
Who's in the
here.
gate?
I want to go see.
Let's go look.
see.
We gotta see who's in the gate.
Hey. Oh, William's right here
Look.
underneath us.
This is our
This
great,
is great
How many?
grandfather.
Father.
I think it's
Three
three greats. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And you guys, I have been in the cemetery before a couple times with other people touring. I've walked past this very structure here, not even realizing my great-great-great-grandpa was right here
What a
because
shame.
there's no headstone.
Yeah, why isn't there a headstone? We're gonna fix this.
We're gonna fix this.
We will fix
mark
this.
our word. Mark
We will
our
mark
word.
this ground
Mark this ground.
with our word.
With our word. You have our word. Whoa, this is old. Okay, so who are these people? The Bartons. I do not know the Bartons.
But look how old it is.
But we can go in. Look at this. We can go in.
They died in 1880.
Okay. Parr. W.F. Parr. Okay, none of these people have the same last names. What's going on here? Why are they all protected? Okay, these two are Bars. And this is a Barton. I want to know the history. Private Utah Militia. Black Hawk War.
Okay, and this fell off. Why doesn't someone fix this?
Someone should fix this. Is that why they put a gate around it, maybe?
I don't know.
Maybe
I
they...
wonder if this is the oldest part.
Is it?
I don't know.
We're not sure why this particular section has its own fence. If anybody knows, we would love to hear.
Okay, yes.
So cool.
And there's money on this grave.
I saw that, and there's the rocks. Do you see that?
So are they buried underneath him?
Yeah. Dearest.
Even though you are far away, our thoughts are with you every day.
Oh.
Till we meet again. Till we meet again. That's such a pioneer
That is a pioneer.
saying.
Oh.
Do we know who's on here?
No, we don't. Peter. I like that name. He
Yeah.
died in 2002.
He had apostle names plus light.
That's so cool. Peter James Light. It means they were actually a pioneer that came across the plains.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you know how they put those markers on the old historic homes?
Yes. Look at this.
These are really old. Whitaker.
And Nellie Woodruff. Remember how we're related to? We're not really related to Woodruffs. I think they're married in.
Yeah, but I think she's the descendant of Wilford Woodruff, who was a
Yeah.
prophet.
Yeah. And on Mom's side, there is Wilford Woodruff somewhere.
You're right.
But this is Whitaker,
But
so
this is Whitaker.
I don't know how that works.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that is cool.
Thomas Tanner.
Who are you? Blacksmith. Blacksmith, yep. England. And died in Great Salt Lake City. I love that.
That's cute.
Okay,
Okay, so this is
it's broken.
Plat A.
Block
Block 11.
11. 11, the 11th hour. Right next to the state capitol is the Utah Pioneer Memorial Museum, run by the Daughters of the Utah Pioneers. In the book, Elizabeth's granddaughter Nora mentions a display in this museum, a display that honors Elizabeth and her husband Thomas. The few attempts I have made over the years to attend this museum were all unsuccessful, as the museum operates Monday through Friday, and typically, whenever I happen to be in Salt Lake, it's always on a Saturday. So this was our time to finally explore this museum. We were on a quest to find this display, hoping that in the process we might find a clue about William.
For slippers.
Yeah, I was guessing that there would probably be like
Yeah.
a silk exhibit or something.
So there's no picture of her here, is that correct?
That's a different database.
Oh,
but I can
okay.
look
Yeah.
that
We'll
up
check
too.
that out too.
Maybe that'd be cool if there was a different picture we've not seen, but I'm sure.
I'm sure there is, yeah.
It was suggested by the museum volunteers that we make a trip down to the basement, where the museum curator could help us dig a little deeper.
So these are the pictures we have of her.
Yeah, we do know this one. That one I've
I've
never
not seen that
seen.
one.
Oh my gosh,
I just got goosebumps.
I was
That's one
wondering.
we have not
Yeah,
seen.
I was wondering what she looked like when she was older.
Oh my goodness, I can't believe we've not seen that. That is so cool. So the one thing we've never been able to find is a picture of her first husband, who's our great-great-grandpa.
That's what we need to look up.
We should see, I mean, I doubt it because he passed away not too long after he was here.
Yeah.
You just never know.
You never know.
We should probably see if he's in the system. William Oakton, but any of the Oaktons would have been related.
William Whitaker.
Oh, that's her
that's
son.
her.
That's going to be her son.
I have no.
We'll stop and see on the way down.
Okay.
Though we found a new photo of Elizabeth, we had no luck finding a photo of William.
So, we just met with the curator, and we actually found something new. Do you want to share?
Yeah, we found a new, more, I don't know, an older picture of one of our ancestors.
Yes. Elizabeth Oakton Mills Whitaker, which is who we're here for, she's like a prominent woman, has her own museum, has a book, you know, you've been following her book, and we thought we'd come here and maybe just see a couple artifacts we haven't seen, but they actually had a photo.
Crazy.
We're gonna show it up on the screen right here. Here it is. And we've never seen this photo before. It's not in the book. I've never seen it in the museum. It's not on Family Search. So we think we have a new contribution to add to the story.
Yes, we found a gem.
You are welcome, Elizabeth. No, just kidding. So now we're about to explore the museum, and we have a list right here.
Yes.
She printed us a list of all the artifacts. So this is so cool. If you ever get a chance to come to this museum, it's right next to the State Capitol building in Salt Lake. Go down to the basement, down to this room right here, the carriage room. It's kind of cool. And right over here by the elevator, there is an office. That's where the curator is, and you can tell her any name of any ancestor, and she'll look it up in her system, and it will tell you if your ancestor has a photo here or an artifact, and then she'll print it out, and then you can go through the museum looking for your ancestors' items, and it's pretty cool.
What a fun thing to do with your family.
Yeah.
On a weekday, not a Saturday.
No, yeah, they're closed on Saturdays, we've learned. Gotta come Monday through Friday. So we are about to explore, and we'll show you what we find. Bone shaker. Yeah, I don't think I would want to get my bones shaken. I think name is spelled Utah right there. It should be U-T-A-H. But that's okay. That's okay.
Utah.
It's in Salt Lake. It's where they had all the balls. All the regal balls and dances everybody would go to. We're at the Mansion House. Do you think this is a masculine bed set? It's hard to
And that tree, you hang your canes on it and your umbrellas.
That is so funny.
That is a very old piece of wedding cake.
Curtain from Old Salt Lake Theater, erected in 1862.
And as we continued to explore the museum, we came across someone whom we thought may have been straight out of the 1800s himself.
Jesus sought me when a stranger, wandering from the fold of God. He to rescue me from danger, interposed his precious blood.
Suits look the same, I'm not gonna lie.
Not gonna lie.
Wedding dress, very different. I'm gonna sneeze. There's dust.
How is someone that tiny?
Who wants to feel that? There's spotty
I know. They're all so tiny. I know there were some big ladies. I saw their photos out there.
Yeah, there's she
Here's
is.
a bigger one.
She's bigger.
It's because she's older, so she's our size. Just kidding. She's average, like normal. Oh, interesting.
And then there it was. We had found our first artifact. That's it.
Curtains.
Made by Elizabeth Mills Whitaker from the Isle of Man. Given as a wedding present. That's so cool.
Louise W. Conklin.
Wow. After finding another very aged old piece of wedding cake, we finally came across the display of Elizabeth and Thomas.
It says right here, 3rd floor silk
room. We're going to assume it's these babies over here.
We just can't see.
We just can't see. Unfortunately, the door was locked, and we had to look at everything through the window of the door.
Artifact number 11651 and 1152.
Well, that's 114.
So they're doilies round.
Oh, on the wall.
Oh,
Chris.
there it is. There it is.
Oh,
Right
there
those
it
two.
is.
We're all
Oh
looking
my
in the
gosh, we're
cases.
blind. Doily, there it is.
There it is. Humans, we are smart.
Made by Nora Barber Miles. That's who wrote my book, or who wrote the book.
Okay, so it says donors, Bradshaw and Christie, but Pioneer Whitaker, Elizabeth Whitaker.
That's funny. It says made by Nora.
Doily, lace doily, white tatted in black wood frame,
That's it.
green velvet background, made by Christie B. Bradshaw, Cedar City, under pictures of grandparents.
Wow, that's so cool. With all of the glares from the lighting, the best image we were going to get was from this still shot photo. This room features Utah's early silk industry, honoring Elizabeth and her husband. If you would like to visit this museum and take a tour of Elizabeth's artifacts, here is a screenshot of the paper with the item numbers and locations. After a day well spent at the Pioneer Museum and the Salt Lake City Cemetery, I decided I would pay a visit to the Centerville Cemetery on the way home to find Elizabeth's grave. Okay, so I've had to get creative. I'm at the Centerville Cemetery. I have no idea where this grave is. I've seen pictures of it, but it looks like a lot of other graves here. So I decided what I would do is pull up pictures of the grave on Family Search and see if I can zoom in on the background. So I zoomed in on the background and I saw this house right here with this tree, which tells me that's where my family is buried. So let's go check it out. I think it is gonna be right this way because that's where the house is in the background. So I think it's gonna be right over here, I guess. I found it. There's the house. There it is right there. Let's see, Whitaker. So William is right here, William Gill Oakton. So he's buried here with a few others. His stepfather, Thomas. Let's try this one. Elizabeth! There's Elizabeth's grave. Oh my gosh, it's covered in leaves and grass. Elizabeth. There it is. Yay! So she's just right here. Okay, let's find William. Thomas. This is Thomas's grave. Thomas. Where's William? This must be William. No, it's not. No. Oh, This grave marker doesn't say anything at all. Huh. Okay, so here's the situation. So we have the Whitaker family marker right here, and then right in front of it, we have Thomas. So he is A448, and then Elizabeth is A447, and then it goes A446, A445, and I don't know who this is, but I'm guessing this could be A444. So William Jr. is A441. So you would think it would go 4, 3, 2, but these are different families, and there is no 1. I even went across the road over there. There's nothing over there. But when I look up these tombstones, it's not A44. It's different numbers. So it tells me he's got to be right here with his family, but he's not. I've been here for an hour. I've gone around and I've uncovered the leaves from all of the headstones, and there is no William. And according to the numbers on the map on findagrave.com, it says he should be right here, and there's even a picture of his headstone, which matches all of their headstones. It looks just like these. So it really is a mystery. I don't know where he is, where he's buried. It's the strangest thing. But I do know this is where he should be. This is where his parents are and some of his siblings. So I'm happy to know I found the family. I just haven't quite found exactly where William is, but his name is on this marker right here. So he really should be right here. It's the strangest thing. Oh my goodness, I finally found it. Look, you guys, this is how it looked. Completely covered with grass. Look at this. It's been completely covered. Ugh. There it is. William. There it is. I found it. Yay. It's been completely covered with grass. There was no way I would have found that. I probably stepped on it without realizing it. That means there should be another grave right in here. I looked on a map. I got onto the city cemetery map, and it was really hard to do on my phone because it's not phone friendly, and I had to zoom in and zoom in and zoom in and navigate through all these graves. And sure enough, there it was. It was showing that it was right above Grace Whitaker, which is just a couple over from Elizabeth Whitaker, his mom. And I knew he had to be right here, and there he was. He was covered in grass. So I can now go home. I've now found his grave, and I know that he rests right here. He's the first one. He's the first one buried in this whole area of his family. The first one buried there. There he is. It's almost like this side of the family has kind of been forgotten because William was the firstborn and only child of Elizabeth's first husband, William, and his father passed away, had no other children, so there was nobody else looking for that side of the family. And William Jr. had 3 daughters, and they kind of all weren't a part of the church. They kind of just didn't have a testimony of family history, weren't active in the church or weren't members of the church, and didn't leave that legacy for their children. So their children weren't members of the church, really didn't have an interest in all of this, and there's just really nobody trying to know his story. There's nobody trying to piece it all together and remember him and his father, both of the Williams. And so I don't know, I really feel that when I learn that William Sr. doesn't even have a grave marker, and he's not even buried near any of his relatives. He's buried next to the Whitakers,
which is interesting because he never knew the Whitakers. That was his widowed wife's next husband and all of her children with him. So he's buried by people he's not related to. And then his son is in another cemetery here in Centerville, and his grave is covered in grass. It's been grown over so nobody could see it. So it just feels like these are graves nobody ever visits. There's no descendants or posterity trying to visit them or carry on that legacy. It's kind of sad. So we're going to do something about that.
I began to do some research on the Oakton family, starting with William and his brother Charles. The story of the Oakton brothers begins in Derbyshire, England in 1842, when William and Charles's father, Charles Oakton Sr., passed away at the young age of 36, leaving behind his wife Mary and their 7 children, William 13, Mary 10, Charles 9, Thomas 6, Philip 4, Joseph 2, and Robert just 5 months old. As their mother Mary struggled to support her large family, her 2 oldest sons, William and Charles, found employment as servants and stable boys for aristocratic families. Here is a record of William having the position of gamekeeper at Grendon Hall Manor in Warwickshire, England. The occupation of gamekeeper had a status below that of a squire and rector, and above a doctor and schoolmaster. A gamekeeper had the responsibility to perform tasks on estates and private lands to ensure that there would be adequate game to hunt for the estate owner. Basically, they were the police of the forest. In 1848, Mary's son Thomas passed away at the age of 12. 5 years later, Mary learned about the gospel and joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints on February 25, 1852. William was eventually baptized January of 1853 at the age of 24, followed by Philip, age 15, on December 1853, and Charles at age 21 in January of 1854. A year after her baptism, on February of 1853, Mary married a man named Michael Chadd, who was also a new convert to the church. They had a daughter together named Clarice. Clarice would unexpectedly pass away in Utah at the age of 5 years old. Surprisingly, I learned that William married a woman named Mary Hodgkinson a month before he immigrated to America. Mary was never baptized, though some of her relatives were. This had me wondering if this had anything to do with her not joining him in America. There are no divorce records, which means Mary would have still been married to William when he married Elizabeth a year later in Utah. It seemed to be a common thing that happened back then, as we see with Elizabeth's third husband, Thomas Whitaker, in whom he had other wives in other parts of the country and in other countries, who later came seeking an official divorce so they could remarry. Thomas's daughter Annie, from his Tahitian wife, ended up getting married to Albert Jerome Slater as his second wife, and she bore him 11 children. Elizabeth was aware with Thomas's other wives, and so it has me thinking she most likely would have been aware of William's wife. Mary Hodgkinson would later remarry in 1857, stating on her marriage license that she was a widow. This tells me that she was aware of William's death. On February 15, 1854, the Oakton family, along with 484 members of the Derby branch, set sail from Liverpool, England, on the ship Windermere for America. Unfortunately, their sister Mary would not be joining them in America. She married a non-member, a painter named Joseph Bingham, who refused to join the church and refused to immigrate to America. This left Mary brokenhearted, feeling abandoned and grieving for her family. She never did see them again. Throughout the story, the beginning of the book, or at least half of the book, she talks about this character, Mary Alice, who's supposed to be Charles and William's younger sister, and she lives with Mrs. Moore, and Mrs. Moore teaches her how to be a nurse. But when I've done the family history, there's a Mary, but she stayed in England, and she never came to the United States, and she passed away in England, and she was brokenhearted because her whole family came to Utah, and she had to stay behind with her husband. I guess that obviously must have been fiction because I couldn't verify it.
Yeah, I know nothing about her.
Okay, so that makes sense. But then the weird thing is if you look at Elizabeth's family, she has a sister named Mary Alice. And so that confused me. She has a younger sister. So she had two younger sisters. The middle sister was Mary Alice, and then the younger one was Martha.
I really can't answer that for sure.
Okay.
But it sounds like she adopted the name.
And created a character, yeah.
And created a character.
Okay, that's what I thought. The voyage to America was very difficult. The seas were not friendly, and the ship endured many storms, including a storm in the Irish Channel that nearly shipwrecked the passengers. The ship also caught fire and was driven off course for several hundred miles, which increased the trip to 67 days at sea, traveling by way of the West Indies and landing in New Orleans. After a few days of taking a steamship up the Mississippi, the passengers were quarantined at Quarantine Island for smallpox and black fever. After 3 weeks, they started again on their journey, when within 85 miles of Kansas City, their mother Mary was stricken with cholera and passed away the same day. She was buried on the shore of the Missouri River. Broken-hearted, the children pursued their journey without their mother. Upon arrival in Kansas City, the Oakton family prepared to cross the plains with their uncle, Thomas Boehm, their mother's brother. The family purchased 3 oxen and set out for Utah with Captain Jeb Smith's company. On their journey, the Plains Indians were very hostile. However, the Oaktons felt the hand of the Lord with them, as they experienced many tender mercies and miracles that could not be explained. One of such miracles was narrowly avoiding an attack on Fort Laramie, in which the fort was burned and many soldiers were killed. The Oaktons had been protected. On October 6, 1854, the weary family reached Salt Lake City. To their surprise, they were greeted by a host of people offering them food from their gardens. The Oaktons were grateful. The youngest, Robert, went to go live with his stepfather, Michael, who had purchased a home in the 14th Ward. Michael remarried, and shortly after, his daughter, Robert's 5-year-old sister, Clarice, passed away. Unfortunately, Michael was very cruel to Robert, causing young Robert to run away and live with his uncle. In Salt Lake City, William, Charles, and their brother Philip rented a house together. This aligns with the story in the book. However, unlike in the book, Charles did not travel with Elizabeth's family across the plains. But, just as in the book, William and Charles both fell in love with Elizabeth Mills. Charles courted Elizabeth in hopes to marry her. However, because of his temper and not always demonstrating complete faithfulness to being a member of the church, this troubled Elizabeth, and as soon as she met his older brother William, she was smitten. William and Elizabeth were married on October 6, 1855. However, their new life together would be short-lived. Charles, the rejected suitor, went to live with Elizabeth and William that winter. In March, Charles and William went out to an Indian farm to work until the last of June. When they came back home, after they had been there a few days, they decided to go over to the West Mountain for a load of wood. While there, and after they had their wood loaded, Charles suggested that they go swimming in the Jordan River. They took their clothing off and left it on the riverbank, and after being in the river a short time, Charles noticed William sinking and rushed to his aid. They struggled in the water together until Charles almost lost his life. He scrambled out of the water only to find his brother never came up again. There are some accounts that mention William went fishing when he drowned in the river. According to Charles's account, he couldn't break the news to Elizabeth, so he went and got a neighbor to tell her. At first, it was very hard to believe such a terrible calamity could befall her life, and she kept on repeating, "What can I do? What can I do with my life now?" After 24 hours, worry became a dreadful fear. She refused to have anyone stay with her, thinking he would come back, but found in her loneliness that the dead do not return to explain such things. She was a wife, widow, and mother before she was 16 years of age. In the book, the author writes into the story that William was not a member of the church, and neither was his brother Charles, but that he became interested and began to study the gospel while they were married, in hopes to be baptized after his work trip. This simply was not true, but for some reason or another, neither were sealed together in this life. Instead, they had a civil wedding. Charles stayed and boarded with Elizabeth the rest of the winter, and apparently proposed to her 2 different times. She told him if he would wait 2 years while she thought things over, she might change her mind. The bishop of their ward advised Charles to marry his brother's young widow. This was in the time of the Reformation. This was customary at that time. Something happened in the ward that Charles didn't like, and he left and went back east. He tried to get Elizabeth to go with him. Again, she refused. In the story, there is mention of an opal ring that Charles purchased for Elizabeth, and when she turned him down, he gave that ring to William as a gift, in which he in return gave to Elizabeth when he proposed to her. I have not been able to verify this, so I think it's safe to assume that this was fiction. But true to the story in the book, after Elizabeth met Thomas and became engaged to him, she once again had an encounter with Charles. Someone tapped her on the shoulder. Looking up, she saw Charles Oakden, who had come into her life so many times. He asked her to let him carry her parcels. They were returning home in silence when Charles said, "Lizzie, I have come back to claim you." She said, "Well, you are too late. I'm going to marry Thomas Whitaker tomorrow." At this time, he flew into a rage and said, "Well, he will never be father to little William. I will steal him first. You have been constantly on my mind since I left." Also in the book was mention of an Indian baby bassinet that Charles had purchased from a Native American tribe and gifted to Elizabeth for her baby. I've never been able to verify this. It's never come up in any of the documents that I have read, so I think it's safe to assume that this too was fiction. Elizabeth accepted the marriage proposal of Thomas Whitaker, and they were married and settled in the Centerville area, where Thomas raised William as his own and reared 10 additional children whom he had with Elizabeth. In fact, Elizabeth's oldest child, Samuel Whitaker, was a well-known architect. Now, earlier this year, I happened to be watching one of my favorite YouTube channels, when lo and behold, I was completely surprised when I heard him mention my ancestor, Samuel Whitaker. He was talking about an old chapel, a Latter-day Saint chapel here in Utah that he had visited, and he learned that its architect was Samuel Whitaker. Now, I've included a link to his video down below if you want to watch it, but here is a clip of him talking about my ancestor, Samuel Whitaker.
Let's try all this again. So in 1902, they held another contest for an architect, and the winner was Samuel Whitaker. And Whitaker instead proposed this circular dome. So they started building it, they completed it, and it was dedicated in 1905, dedicated by the then church president, Joseph F. Smith. And one of the biggest features that it has with a circular dome is it allows natural light to come in from the top, and that still exists to this day.
Now, talking about Samuel Whitaker, here is another fascinating moment that happened during the making of this video. So here is an old picture that I inherited from Nora Miles's box of notes. Remember, she is the author of Elizabeth's biography. Well, over the years, we have tried to figure out who it is in this photo. I have always guessed that it's most likely Elizabeth, even though I have compared this photo to her other photos, and I don't quite see the full resemblance. However, my grandma's sister has said over the years that she believes it is Elizabeth. Well, I wanted to figure out where this photo was taken. Because it came in a frame, that told me this was taken by a professional photographer, most likely while she was traveling somewhere. Well, as I read through all of her interviews and stories, the only place that really stood out to me where she traveled to was the 1910 Missouri World's Fair. So I decided to go look up photos from that event. And as I scanned through photo after photo in the archive, I came across a photo that resembled the same background that you see in this photo. Here is a side-by-side comparison. If you look at the building in the back, the shape of the windows, the poles, the color of the brick, the canopies over the windows, I truly believe that this is a photo of Elizabeth when she went to visit her son Samuel Whitaker and his family at the 1910 Missouri World's Fair. She said in her own words that this was the best time of her life. So it would make sense she would want to capture that in a photograph. Now, after having been married to Elizabeth for 11 years, Thomas met and married Hannah Wadoops, a 21-year-old janitor who worked at the school where his children attended. She was about 31 years younger than Thomas. She bore him 8 children and even named her firstborn daughter Elizabeth Annie. She also named one of her sons William. This was something that Elizabeth always struggled with. She did not like Hannah or her children and even refused to attend her funeral.
Wow.
Well,
okay.
given the fact she was so bitter all through her life toward plural marriage, and she was so harsh toward Hannah, I think unduly harsh toward Hannah. My personal opinion is she could have treated Hannah much better.
I feel the same way, yeah.
Hannah had bless her heart, she hung in there and was a very good mother. And had a wonderful family. I still am a little bit angry with Elizabeth for how poorly she treated her. So, and Thomas was so faithful to the prophet.
Oh, he was really quite a remarkable fellow, quite unlike so many others. Very devout, and yet he never held a position of importance in the church. She was a believer. She was active in the faith, and yet she did some things that really irritated Thomas. Like she loved to play cards and feel like gambling or something.
Yeah.
The church really looked down on it. When Thomas was away, she had a little club, and then they would, play cards and have tea. At that time, the word of wisdom certainly was not an official part of our theology. It was certainly taught, but Thomas, right from the very beginning, was adamant about it, and she tried to hide it from him.
Elizabeth lived to be 98 years old, and her home is currently a museum in Centerville, Utah. After William's untimely death, the remaining Oakton brothers eventually married and settled in Beaver, Utah. Charles purchased and ran a successful sawmill. He married Olive Tyler in 1859, with whom he had 8 children. Robert was elected Justice of the Peace, in which he served 4 years and remained a faithful member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints all his life. Charles later became a resident of Draperville, Utah, and was claimed to be a respected man of the Draper community. During his years in Draper, he was endowed and sealed to his wife Olive. Charles suffered from heart disease, and towards the end of his life, he endured a drawn-out legal dispute over land which worsened his condition. It's possible he may have been living in Draper to receive medical care for this heart disease. While preparing to visit a doctor in San Francisco, where he hoped he might be cured, Charles suddenly passed away from the disease, leaving behind his wife and a large family in Beaver, Utah. 6 years later, Charles's daughter Olive would pass away from the same disease. Charles's wife Olive would experience the passing of her husband Charles and 7 of their children before her own passing on September 19, 1882, at age 43 from an illness. Several months prior to when she came down with symptoms, a personage appeared to her in a dream and said, "This cough will take you to Charles." The year prior to her passing, she had her children's ordnance work completed in the temple. At last, they were sealed as a family. When I learned that Charles was buried in the Draper Cemetery, I knew I had to go find his grave. I was born and raised so close to this cemetery and had no idea my whole life that I had an ancestor buried there.
All right, so we just met up today. Where are we?
The Draper Cemetery in Draper.
And have you ever been here before?
I have passed by it many times, but I've never actually walked through it, so this is going to be really fun.
This is the cemetery, you guys. It's kind of a smaller one, but it's long. It's a long cemetery. It's just kind of condensed. So it's an older cemetery. They don't have any more grave plots available. So there's a lot of older people buried here, but we are gonna find a grave that dates back to 1877 is when Charles was buried. So I don't know if you know this. This is who we're looking for, Charles Oakden.
I didn't, but I know now. That's going to be thrilling.
He's a great-great-great-uncle.
My grandma Barnes' son.
Yep. And he actually lived in Beaver.
Oh,
but
that is so cool.
He lived in Beaver. That's where he settled. But the record says he passed away in Draperville. This used to be called Draperville.
Oh, I learned something then. I didn't know that.
And so I think that could be why he's buried here and all of his family is buried in Beaver. I don't know why they didn't take his body to Beaver and have him buried with all of his wife and children. They passed away later, but he did have some children buried there. I don't know why he would be buried so far away, but same with his brother, Will, who was our great-great-great-great-grandpa. He passed away in the Jordan River. They buried him in the Salt Lake Cemetery, but his wife and his kids are all buried in Davis County.
Well, you know what? These are 2 mysteries that we're going to solve.
We're going to solve.
We're going to figure out why. So either he had somebody here that was close, or maybe it was cheaper, or they didn't have a way to get him to the other one, but Beaver's so far away, or somebody wanted closer access, but we'll find out.
I'm guessing it had to do with money because I found out in advance that
That's what I would think.
He doesn't have a headstone. That tells me it was a money issue.
Right.
And so it's sad. We have these 2 brothers, Will and Charles, who both are buried isolated from their families, and neither of them have a headstone, which tells you nobody was planning on visiting their graves. Because when you plan on visiting a grave of a loved one, often you mark it.
You need to know where it's at.
You put a headstone on it. So we're going to get to the bottom of this. We're going to take care of that, aren't we?
We are.
We are.
We're on a
better
quest.
Believe it.
We're on a good quest here.
Hey, let's go find Charles.
Okay, I'm with you.
So we know that he's 7 rows in and 2 intersections east. So we're just going to start at the corner here of the cemetery, and we're going to try to figure out 7 rows.
And how did you find this out? Was it at your local library or somewhere?
No, I found all this on Ancestry.
I knew it had to be somewhere like that.
Yeah. So we're gonna climb up here on the grass and we are just gonna start reading headstones.
And it's such a beautiful day for this.
It's warm.
Really beautiful and nice, and the leaves.
Oh, yeah, this is right. The first headstone should say Patricia because I looked online. So look, there she is. So we know we're in the right spot. This is Patricia. So I'm guessing these are the rows, Mom. Wherever there's a break, this would be the first row, right? We have to figure out what constitutes a row because we have to count 7 rows. Okay, so we're going to be looking for the last name Brown.
With the gravestones, 1, 2, 3, 4, or would it be just down this way?
It was like 2 or 3 graves in between each row. So I do know when we see the last name Brown, we're there,
Okay.
and then we go east.
Well,
so we're
go
going to
down.
start looking for Brown. Okay, so Fitzgerald. I recognize a lot of these names from people that live out here. Oh, look at that grave. That's cute. Oh, Mom, I'm caught on a thorn.
The graveyard's
I'm caught.
trying to take you with it.
Oh, look, here's a prominent one. Oh, the ones that are marked with stars on the map are Utah pioneers. See? This has a red star on the map.
Oh, that's good. Take a picture of that. And then also,
The Stokes. There they are.
and there's some more Stokes right there, so he's going to be nearby these big ones.
If any of you are related to the Stokes, they were definitely prominent people in Draper. Okay.
Oh, there's another one right over there, Stokes.
Those are all the Stokes. Okay, so we're looking for Brown.
It must have been at Plegamus.
Lost in Montana. That's sad.
Forever with us still, Todd Rollins, Springfellow.
Oh, he got lost.
1959 to...
Oh, Brown. Here we are. Brown.
Okay.
Brown. So
we are onto something. This is cool.
this is it. I think we're going to go straight here. That's the
Okay,
Browns.
so look. And so make a note, he's diagonal from that big one.
Yep.
And right next to the Lost in Montana one.
Okay.
So he's next to the Lost in Montana grave and kitty corner from the Stokes big headstone.
Okay, so we're gonna go east. We're gonna go 2 blocks east, or intersections east. Let's see. And he's gonna be on the right side, but we won't know because he doesn't have a grave marker. It won't say Charles. So now I'm gonna look and see who he's by. Here's another Brown. There's a couple of Browns. I feel like he's right by this one up here.
I mean, I don't know how
I feel like he's right in this area. So here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna look on the map and see what grave is next to him, and that's how we'll know.
Where was Brown again? Right there.
There's Browns on the corner, and then there's Browns right here. We know he's by all the Browns. Okay, we're looking for, what was her name, Mom?
Not Esther.
It was the other one. It started with an E, Amelia Brown. We're looking for another Brown, and then...
Well, I get it mixed up because there's an Esther right there.
Okay, we've got the names that he's next to, so let's find those names. Mom, here she is, Mom. Here she is. Ellie Moore Brown. So he's going to be right above her. He's going to be right...
So smart.
So he's going to be right here. Right here. He's
Brown. And who's the other ones that are by him?
He's going to be right here. He's right here. I just know it. He's right here. There's not a grave. So this should say, here's another Brown. What does that say? That's not Brown. I can't read that name. Let's go up here. Day. Okay, he should be right here, but none of these people have grave markers either. So we don't know. Because, let's see what this one is. This is, what does that say? Samantha.
Oh my gosh, they don't take
Wife. It just says wife E. Samantha.
They don't even take
So let's look on the map. Wife E. Samantha. Okay, we found them. We did the math. I looked on the map.
Ancestry, and we have all these markers around it.
Mom, go that way. Sorry. We just we looked on the map, and I have the names of all of the tombstones that are around his grave. So I was able to look on the map and locate each of those tombstones that shows up on the map around his grave, and I was able to pinpoint this is where he's buried, right here. So that's Charles Oakton's grave. He's right next to this grave right here. Deborah Terr. So right next to Deborah. And he's right above
this grave here, Ellie Moore Brown. It's funny, her tombstone faces this way, but everybody else, their tombstones face west. Hers is turned towards the east. So he is right above her according to the map, right here. And then the people who are buried next to him, they also do not have headstones. So we almost have a whole row of no headstones till we get all the way here to Samantha. Samantha has a headstone, and there's at least 4 other people buried here that do not have a tombstone. And then we have Charles right here. So if you're ever at the Draper Cemetery and you want to pay a visit to Charles's grave, now you know where he's buried. And he is right in front of this tombstone here, directly west of Hannah Stringfellow Rollins.
Like 2.5.
2.5, so that's the next headstone.
So let's go 1,
2.
Hold on. I need 2.5. So he'd be.
So that's the next guy. So then do Charles now.
Okay, so that's the next guy. And we'll do 1, 2, and 2.5. So, oh my gosh, it puts us right smack with her smack above us.
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't work out a foot above or behind. He is right.
He's right
here.
there. So
I'm gonna put my phone down right
well, if
there.
that's where his headstone is, Mom, he would actually be behind you.
Right, so he's gonna be behind
So if
us.
he would be behind you, so his body is going to be right there.
You can make it a big headstone, so we'll put it more in line with this
Yeah.
headstone, right?
Yeah, that seems right to me. Is that your car?
Okay, so you don't have a measuring thing, do you?
No. So I'm trying to understand a little bit more about Charles. Who did he become? After he got married and started having his own family, he became a father. What kind of a person was he? And I can only guess based on clues that I find. It's hard to make that judgment because if it were me, I would want my husband close by so I could visit his grave often, so the children could visit his grave. I would be there putting flowers on it, thinking about him, visiting on his birthday. And I would almost think that if it was somebody I maybe didn't have the best relationship with, then maybe that wouldn't matter. Maybe I would focus more on just doing what's cheapest. If it was faster and easier just to bury him here. Obviously there was no money spent on a headstone, which probably wasn't that uncommon back then because not a lot of people had money. But I would just, it's hard to think that if it was somebody you really cared about, you would want them closer to you, buried with your family in your family part of the cemetery.
You would, you really would.
Even if you couldn't afford a headstone.
Right.
You would want them there so you could see them. So where they lived way out in Beaver, it's just strange that they didn't have someone bring his body.
That is really strange, but we're going to get to the bottom of it, and it's been interesting. And Lindsay brought us right to the grave. It's amazing what you can find out on Ancestry.com.
It is. I'm wondering if he owned a plot here, or somebody donated a plot.
That is a good thought.
And they didn't have money to bury him anywhere else, so they buried him here.
Yes. So that is a very, very good thought.
Same with Will, Mom. Will's buried in the Salt Lake Cemetery, but he's buried next to a whole bunch of Whitaker graves. Probably because Thomas Whitaker might have owned some land
Right,
there.
and they became family after the other, so yeah.
I don't know.
Makes sense.
It's hard to say, but
We're piecing it together.
I did talk to the Centerville historian, and he has a hard time believing that Charles was the monster he was painted to be in the book. He has a hard time believing that he had to do with his brother's death and that he was that kind of a person. He feels like that was exaggerated. So we're trying to figure out what kind of a person he was.
Oh, that's going to be interesting to know.
Yeah, we want to tell his story the right way.
Exactly. Everybody should know his story, and it's really, really good for family history to find all this out.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe one day some of his descendants will find this video.
Exactly, and then, we bring both sides of the veil together.
Yeah.
We bring both sides together.
That's what we're doing. So you met Nora Miles, the author
Yes,
of the book. What can you tell us about what you remember?
Well, I can barely remember it. And of course, it's before my mom died, because what she did was she turned all of the records over to my mother, because she was big in history and big in historian and in fact and family history. So she wanted them to charge on. So
Why did she choose your mother?
that's what I got to try and remember. So stay tuned. But she gave my mom a box of stuff, who gave it to me, because I'm about the only one in our family that goes to church and does all that. So I met Nora Miles. Is it Miles? And she was a nice, sweet, elderly lady who loved her family, who loved to do a lot of history. That's all I heard, that she was just really good at it. So she entrusted our family with it.
Do you remember anything about her personality?
Sweet, really sweet, and a little outgoing, and just worker.
Yeah? Where did she live?
A little bit more. My grandma Barnes, was more, that used to be Oakton, was more withdrawn and more, but this lady was an active member of the church and very nice and a very hardworking on her family history.
And where did she live? Did she live in Salt Lake?
It was up north somewhere, Centerville, Bountiful, somewhere.
Oh, so she
was up north somewhere.
And she had a relationship with your mom, like they knew each other well?
We'll have to go to lunch and stay tuned, because I'll have to remember, this has been years ago, and so I'll have to remember, but I think I got that into that box and gave a lot of it to you.
Yeah, that's how I ended up with the book and all the records.
Yeah, so I entrusted it to you.
That's why we're here today.
That's why we're here today. Nora Miles.
So Nora must have known that in advance.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, the box.
But still, I'm wondering why she chose your mom, because they weren't close, those families.
Well, if you think about it, Alta, she was working and didn't know her that well, or, if you think about Muriel's not even her other sister's not even a member of the church and living in Colorado, and Alta, not a member really of the church, and so we're the only ones that she knew that we were members of the church.
So at that time, your mom was still a
She
member?
she probably knew my dad went, and probably knew my mom went a little bit.
So this was before your mom left the church?
Right, and she probably talked to my mom because of Grandma Barnes, because this would have probably been when Grandma Barnes was still alive, I think.
Nora had 5 children who were all alive at the time our family received all of her notes. Nora's cousin, Lucille, who was my mother's aunt and a daughter of William Jr., may have ended up with Nora's box. After all, in the box there were letters from her and photos of her. However, she passed away in 1979 when Nora was still alive. Lucille didn't have any children, so it's possible after she passed away, the box went to her sister, Alta, who was living in Utah. Alta was my mother's grandma, and when she passed away, she most likely passed the box onto her daughter, my mother's mother. Did Lucille not have children? Because don't you think she would have passed it on to her children?
Well,
she must have not had children.
Oh no, they didn't have children at all.
So she had no descendants to give it to.
Right. We were the ones.
Oh, we were the ones.
We were the ones, and Heavenly Father probably knew we should have it. But I imagine Nora had talked to Grandma Barnes, or she'd known my mom, and probably, my mom, a lot of people like my mom, because very easygoing, very nice.
Yeah. Okay, we figured that out. Yep, those are the Drapers. Pioneer. Over the past few months, I have been in contact with the Sons of the Utah Pioneers as well as Draper City in hopes to be able to lay a headstone for Charles, but this has been unsuccessful as we have been up against roadblock after roadblock. Unlike the Salt Lake City Cemetery, Draper City does not allow private companies to lay monuments. It must be done through a monument company, with the minimum cost being around $1,500. I've been working with the Sons of the Utah Pioneers to secure donations, but this has been unsuccessful. So just what became of Charles and his descendants? It's believed that William's marriage to Elizabeth caused a rift between the two brothers. Charles was brokenhearted over Elizabeth, as well as the guilt of the death of his older brother William. His heart would continue to suffer until it failed him upon death. Generations of Charles's descendants, each named William, would also experience unfortunate tragedies and legal challenges resulting in their unfortunate and untimely deaths. Charles named his firstborn son William. Unfortunately, baby William did not survive infancy. He also had a son he named Charles. Charles Jr. also had two sons named William and Charles. I noticed that descendants named William only named their sons William, and descendants named Charles would name their sons Charles and William. Charles Jr. would be the first of the Oakton descendants to experience tragedy. While working at a mill east of Beaver, his shoelace got caught in the machinery in such a way that his left foot was torn off, being wrapped 3 times around a shaft before the engine could be stopped. His leg was amputated and he did not survive the injury. Unfortunately, in 2010, his descendant William Oakton IV attempted suicide. According to police reports, he went to seek help from a neighbor who called 911. Officers arrived to find Oakton with his neighbor on the porch. When Oakton was ordered to raise his hands, his shirt rose with his hands, revealing a gun tucked in his pants. He allegedly dropped his hands, pulled out the gun, an airsoft toy gun, and pointed it at officers. The airsoft gun fired, and officers fired at Oakton, who was struck 16 times. And in 2012, his family sued Bountiful and Woods Cross Police. According to the story on KSL, he was found intoxicated, covered in blood, holding a knife, and threatening to kill himself. Oakton IV, age 30, pulled out an airsoft gun that was tucked in his waistband and fired it at officers. They shot at him multiple times, and he died at an area hospital a short time later. Oakton IV had been charged months before the shooting in 2nd District Court with assaulting a police officer. He was found guilty of amended charges of intoxication and damaging a phone. He also had convictions for criminal mischief, driving on a suspended license, driving under the influence, and failing to stop at the command of an officer. His father, William III, who was interviewed in the news story, would also tragically pass away in his home in May of 2020. And then there was the tragic death of my great-great-grandfather, William Jr., who was the Davis County Sheriff. William's only descendant, William Jr., was estranged from the Oakton family and never got to know them. Being the only half-blood sibling in his family, he often felt out of place. William Jr. would likewise experience a difficult life, suffering abuse, divorce, alcoholism, and a very tragic and untimely death. While cleaning a brand new shotgun in preparation for a weekend hunting trip, he made a misjudgment and mistakenly shot himself. He survived long enough to crawl out to the front of the house to notify school children on their way home from school. They ran for help, and he was placed on a train which would take him to the Kaysville Hospital. He survived long enough to tell his family what had happened, then passed away when the train arrived in Kaysville. William had divorced his wife, Mercy Winchester, 7 years prior, leaving in her custody 3 daughters whom he loved dearly but rarely got to see. According to Elizabeth in her biography, she wasn't too fond of Mercy. She had hoped personally that William would marry a girl in their ward who was head over heels about William, and William was fond of her as well. According to Elizabeth, that's when Mercy came along and inserted herself between the two. Her beauty won over William, but according to Elizabeth, their relationship was toxic from day one. William and Mercy were both unhappy, and William took on drinking after their marriage. Mercy herself was also not a fan of William's mother, Elizabeth, causing William and Mercy to be estranged from the family. After they divorced, William moved home with his mother Elizabeth, and Mercy opened up a boarding house in which she ran to earn income to support her 3 daughters. Mercy's disdain for William and his family carried over to her daughters, and my own grandmother had nothing but negative memories and feelings towards her grandmother, Elizabeth Mills Oakton Whitaker. She said that her family felt like the black sheep of the Whitaker family. They didn't receive the same attention, time, love, and gifts that the other grandchildren received. And her only memory of her grandmother Elizabeth was sleeping in a bed with her at age 5 and being scolded by her grandmother Elizabeth for being too restless. It's clear that this family was at odds with Elizabeth and the rest of the Whitakers, and neither side sought to mend that relationship.
Elizabeth didn't like her. Apparently she was kind of wild, promiscuous, yeah. And so they divorced. But, so he came to live with her. His last 2 years, he lived with Elizabeth in her home. He was a sheriff at one time here in Davis County. He held, important positions.
Mm-hmm.
He worked with Thomas. There was never I never saw anything against him ever, other than the fact that he did make some choices from time to time but they liked him. They loved him. Some people claimed he committed suicide, and I'm not sure that really was the case. He was part of the family. If he was as bad as some people claim, she would have kicked him out. She wouldn't have allowed him to be there.
Right.
And she welcomed him.
I began to see the difference between Elizabeth's children who were married in the temple and those of her children who were not. I could see how those blessings and consequences affected generations to come. William Jr., my great-great-grandfather, was not born into the covenant, and he wouldn't be sealed to his parents until decades after his death. His daughters were also not born in the covenant, and their children likewise were not born in the covenant. My grandmother and most of her children eventually left the church, and my mother, who was not born in the covenant, was the only descendant of Williams along with her children who remained faithful in the gospel. My mother broke the chain, and her children were born in the covenant, and our children were born in the covenant as well. This is why the Whitaker Museum had never met a descendant of William Oakton Jr. I was the first to come along and establish a relationship with the museum and Centerville historians. In fact, because of this relationship, I was allowed the special privilege of hosting a tea party for my daughter's 13th birthday in Elizabeth's home.
But his wife Elizabeth, who you are descended from, wanted a nice rock home.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. You can hold it if you like. There's a little handle right there.
So neat.
It's inside.
Oh wow.
And did you notice the toilet has a chain on it? That's how the water was in the top. In England they call it the loo. and notice how thick these walls are. So they have lots of mulberry trees in their yard, and they totally have to. She was a little bit older, but look at all the beading. She did that all by hand. Wow. Amazing.
I wonder what year that's from.
Well, it looks like it would be a 20s.
20s?
Mm-hmm.
That's neat.
Yeah, because she died
In the 30s.
37 or 38.
Yeah.
So she probably made it in the 20s. And this is something that she would wear over a skirt. See, it has it's just kind of a little jacket.
Oh, interesting.
Isn't that beautiful?
1920s fashion.
Right. This is an old curling iron. And of course they didn't have electricity, so how do you think they got it hot?
Over fire? Like a stove or something? Like
Yes, yes. And so they would really have to be careful, wouldn't they, not to burn their hair. But these are really fun curlers. They would twist. Have you ever done rag curls in your hair? You take
you like talk like that and then
no, this this goes on your ear. It's called a carpet beater.
Oh!
And they would put the carpet over the clothesline outside, and then they would just whack it with all the dust.
Oh yeah.
Just not their children.
Right.
Funny.
So this is a biscuit jar, and the biscuits were cookies. There's cookies in there. And apparently Elizabeth's family brought this across the place when they came in, I think it was 1852.
So this came from overseas.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't have a...
I clipped the roses.
Yes, you get to keep your fan. So Ansley will get this one. unless somebody wants to trade. I wondered if Elizabeth might be smiling down, knowing that her son William's descendants were enjoying the beauty, comfort, and history of her beloved home, and that her great-great-great-great-grandchildren were learning about her legacy. And now to set a few more facts straight in the book. Okay, this next character, she was part of the whole story as well. Her name was Mrs. Moore, and she taught Elizabeth, Thomas's wife, how to be a nurse. And I wondered if she might be fictional as well. But then when I was at the museum, they said, oh no, I think there's a page in this book all about a Mrs. Moore. I think she was a real person. And so I might just have to go back and look at that book.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't find anything online. In all my research, I couldn't find anything about a Mrs. Moore.
Huh.
And she seemed to be a key character in Elizabeth's life. I know, these are the little details that went to the grave. I'm like, someday I'll ask. Okay, William had a family Bible with all of his family history in it. And I wondered if that really existed.
Don't know.
You don't know. I didn't think so. I'm like, nobody's mentioned it, so... I believe that Mrs. Moore's character was inspired by Grandma Brown, who was Elizabeth's lifelong friend in Centerville. I could not find any records of a Mrs. Moore. However, there was one written account from a descendant of Elizabeth's who claims that there was a neighbor named Mrs. Moore who discovered the body of William in the Jordan River. However, this conflicts with all other accounts that claim that Charles was the one who notified everyone of William's passing. There is the possibility that there could have been a Mrs. Moore who somehow was involved in locating and identifying William's body. This is something we just may never know. Last year, in 2023, I reached out to my YouTube subscribers to let them know about a GoFundMe fundraiser I had started in hopes to obtain a headstone for my great-great-great-grandfather, William Oakden. Through blessings and miracles, my subscribers pulled through, and we raised enough money to lay a headstone and received a miracle of being allowed to use a private installer. I was able to design and order a granite headstone online for just $200. This put the total cost of headstone and installment around $300, which is a miracle in itself. And it especially helps when it's your family who is the private installer.
Okay, so we're gonna start building the frame. Watch out, Tatum.
Do you want your gloves on, Dad?
Move the fruit over here. The dust is gonna come up into the fruit. Dust.
Alright, the first sketch day!
Woo! And we are doing this. We're doing it. Oh, yeah, make sure you wear glasses. Back away. Back away if you don't have safety glasses on.
There it is.
Let's go down and put that in place.
Yep, and then we can dig it out.
You want me to take it so you can... Slide up that piece of turf.
We'll put rebar in it. Make it better.
Yeah.
Where's the headstone?
It's in the trunk. Should I go grab it? Okay.
We don't.
Oh, let's eat the cupcakes real quick.
Lemon cupcakes, because I know you like lemon.
Let's eat the cupcakes real quick.
That'll be our dessert.
Okay.
Do the trivia.
Serious? Yeah, just put that back.
Oh, cool. I thought you had to put concrete down first.
We just went on. We're kind of just making sure.
My hands are in the water.
It's upside down.
All right, I can take over some of the digging, Chris.
That might be enough, Dad. Let me check.
Well, we gotta put gravel under it too, though.
We do?
Yeah.
Let me check. The cement is that's really rocky. That little normal cement is that rock?
Yep, in bags. Not in a cement truck. It's got bigger gravel like I've got down there. All right, dump some more.
It's satisfying.
Dump it. Okay.
You don't want to get your toes in bleach like you did.
All right, let's dump a little bit more.
I
I don't know. They're somewhere in the truck.
And then just dump, it's fine, I'll wash them. And then dump it into this bucket right here, okay?
This bucket.
Right here. Because this is Grandpa's scale right here.
Yeah.
So I like to film this because I don't have any footage of, Dad, I don't have any footage of you doing masonry work.
Oh, yeah.
Like actually doing it. I just have a video of the finished product. Watch and learn, kids. Watch and learn.
This hasn't done in yet.
Okay. So you just set it on top
And then you sink it in.
Yeah.
Okay.
and that just holds it, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
How deep do you put it in?
Just a pinch or so.
So you use 4 pieces or 2?
I got 4 in there. I got 2 going this way and 2 going this
Look
way.
at you.
They're all done.
It looks like
I saw them when I delivered those.
Yeah, that was somebody's like for a gravestone. I saw them like putting it on his.
Yeah, they were putting it on a gravestone.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe they were letting him go as a. Maybe that was part of
their ceremony.
I bet it was.
No, those things like ones are from multiple gravestones. They went around.
Never put something on a gravestone when people are cleaning up. That's just dumb. Words of the wise.
Now, I think what we're going to do...
The sponge part?
Can you bring this against it and be trapped and it'll freeze?
Okay.
And the cement will pop and crack and the headstone might even crack.
Ooh, right there.
So we'll do another tool. I got a special tool for that.
Yeah.
Okay, where's the sponge? We have that.
Yep.
We got clean water in that one?
Right
Yep.
there.
Just get her good and wet for me, will you?
Yep. Oh, that feels nice and cold.
Now, if we want to go down and start cleaning up there,
Yeah.
and then take it down and put it in that dumpster.
Yeah, kids, let's start putting stuff in the dumpsters that are just right over here.
I guess we can walk it over.
Yeah. Kids,
Do we put in the compost or the waste? The trash?
Wherever the trash.
the trash, probably, yeah.
Okay, now we can do it now. Get out your camera.
Dad, that looks good. Should we stamp it? No, just kidding. Put a
You want your name in there, Dad?
little design
You
in
want
there.
to sign it? Roger Willardson did this.
No.
RW.
Good.
Should we stain it?
Put our handprints around it. Like when we were kids.
No, but don't you worry, after we walk away, like a little kid could come through or a dog.
Yeah.
That's why I'm like, should I just kind of hang around with the kids?
Well, if you put flags up around it, that won't stop them.
No, it won't. They did. What is it called?
Slicker.
A slicker. Makes it look slick.
Why don't we have a tree over the top of us?
William's story began in Derbyshire, England in 1842, when his father, Charles Oakton Sr., passed away at the young age of 36. As their mother Mary struggled to support her large family, her two oldest sons, William and Charles, found employment as servants and stable boys for aristocratic families. On February 15, 1854, the Oakton family, along with 484 members of the Derby branch, set sail from Liverpool, England on the ship Windermere for America. Unfortunately, their sister Mary would not be joining them in America. She married a non-member, a painter named Joseph Bingham, who refused to join the church. The Salt Lake Cemetery told us this is one of the nicest looking cement borders they have ever seen, and I give full credit of that to my dad. This brings us to the end of the story, which is a happy ending in itself. For 168 years, my great-great-great-grandfather, William Oakton, has laid in the Salt Lake City Cemetery with no family to rest by, no grave marker to be remembered by. For 168 years, cemetery visitors have passed over his grave countless times, unaware of his existence. That changed on June 6, 2024. And with this documentary, it is my hope that William will never be forgotten, and that his legacy will live on through his descendants and through all those who watch this video and are touched by William's story. Thank you for your support, and I know that William thanks you as well.